the SEC and the Big Ten announce an advisory board. Oh, okay. This is a new. This advisory board doesn't have any power to change anything or implement their own rules or bylaws. It's just an advisory board. But Bud, when we spend all this time talking about like any kind of potential breakaway or anything else, we're always talking about the SEC and the Big Ten. We see them walking down the street, each holding their bandanas up in the air together. They have declared peace with each other, which I think I'll get to in a little bit. I think that is important. Where do you want to start with this? There's lots of different places that I want to take this, including what they have said so far and what they have not said. What stands out to you about Friday's news?
So a couple things. One, I totally agree with you that if they're doing an advisory board, it does suggest that they're willing to work together. When we get to the inevitable Super League, if it happens, they're going to make a lot more money selling the product as one as opposed to as two. So that there is sort of some signal in that for me. I think that a couple things probably led to this, right? The general unhappiness with the teams that are playing on sort of a pay per play level, even if they're not admitting to it. So that's, I don't know, probably 40 or 50 teams in the sport if you want to be charitable with it. But a lot of those teams do reside in the SEC and the Big Ten. And I think the Tennessee thing happening probably maybe hasten the announcement of this, right? Like Tennessee knew that it was under investigation. They're like, hey, you're punishing us for something that a whole lot of other schools already do. We want to operate like this. Why are we at the mercy of the vote of all of the other members who play a more collegiate game, if we're just speaking frankly, whereas we want to operate like pseudo-professional teams, or at least if the courts force us to do so, we want to be able to kind of be out in front of it. And NCAA, you need us a lot more than we need you. So let's make sure our ducks are in a row. We can go to the NCAA with certain asks that we might have. And hey, need to make sure we're operating in concert as well with our 12-team playoff asks, right? Because they didn't get the unanimous vote to go from 6-6 to 5-7. So we'll see how that goes as they continue to look into this.
God, that part two is another stage of this that I hadn't even got to. All right, so let's start at the beginning. The statement says that this advisory group was formed in reaction to, quote, recent court decisions, pending litigation, a patchwork of state laws, and complex governance proposals. Now, let me just try to put this shout out to our guy Joe Obvious and we do the beep beep boop 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 beep boop boop and translate this for you. Okay, recent court decisions. Well, we've known that they've been getting worked every single time that they've gone to court, including at the highest levels of the Supreme Court of this country, where I'm paraphrasing here, but the judgments include things like this would not be legal in any other industry. Okay, not great. Recent court decisions. All right, step two. Pending litigation. You already mentioned the House case, also the Department of Justice looking into your transfer rules, and the Tennessee case against NIL. So you've got pending litigation in terms of employment status, the regulations on transfers, and the regulations on NIL. A patchwork of state laws. That, of course, is all the different NIL rules across the entire state. And this is the one thing where I agree with our friend Dennis Dodd, the Dodd-father on CBSSports.com, because he called this advisory group a shot across the bow of the NCAA. You are not waging war yet. But when they said that they formed this advisory group in response to, among other things, complex governance proposals, but that sounds to me like they looked at Charlie Baker's big master plan and were like, yeah, no, that's not going to work right now, or that's not going to work for us. And so right now, the line from Greg Sankey, from Tony Petitti is, we are not giving up on the NCAA, but what y'all got going on does not seem to be in line with making sure this thing succeeds at the highest levels into the future.
The NCAA actually serves some pretty good purposes, right? It does administer championships pretty well, especially in the non-revenue sports. It does governance okay for an organization that governs so many different types of schools, and meaning like committed at a certain level, committed at a bit of a lesser level. Enforcement kind of depends on what you think about it in enforcement, but they have some rules they do try to enforce. The members vote on a lot of the rules. Maybe he didn't actually vote on the NIL rules because those changed like a million times. But they are also a good punching bag to have out there. So if you don't want to be the bad guy, if you're Tennessee, if you're Tennessee's president or their AD, man, it's nice to have people punch at the NCAA instead of you. So I don't think that the Big 12 and the SEC necessarily have to have the NCAA go away. The optimal solution here could be to allow the NCAA to continue to exist, just operating in such a way that schools like Tennessee wants it to operate, because then they take all the flack and you kind of skate, right? So, yeah, I don't think it necessarily means that the NCAA goes away, but clearly they did not love Baker's plan. I didn't either. It didn't seem reasonable. No attorney out there suing the NCAA is gonna be like, yeah, that's cool. Just set it up in a trust fund that we'll get.
That makes all of these antitrust issues go away. I promise.
Yeah, that's pretty silly. But to me, Baker's plan felt like a guy who had a group project due and just rushed it. He's like, okay, fine, get it in, procrastinated it. This is kind of what we're looking for, but also it's just like still an F because it's just kind of hastily.
Hey, listen, as somebody who rushed many group projects, you can get a C- or a C anywhere for that. Like you can get a passing grade by just throwing a ton of stuff at the wall without actually having a ton of depth or backup for a lot of your surface level plans. Yes,
I agree. So, yeah, was it in response to Tennessee? I don't think exactly in response to Tennessee. Do I think that the timing of the announcement was coincidental with the NCAA leaking the details of the Tennessee investigation to the New York Times? Probably also not coincidental there, right? It's like, oh yeah, about that, and about other schools receiving letters as well about things like this. Guys, we're not going to investigate this kind of stuff. We're not going to be punishing people in the future for the type of stuff that's about to be legal by the courts 24 to 48 months from now, right? So it sort of reminds me of what the SEC sort of did internally.
I was about to say Mike Slive, rest in peace, man. That's you always bring that one up. That's always a good one.
Mike Slive's like, hey, that's honestly one of the and we said this when we still had SEC rights, so I'm certainly not going to back down from saying it now. That's one of the brilliances of Mike Slive. He got everybody to stop snitching on each other, with very few exceptions. I mean, Dan Mullen type stuff, sure, but like for the most part, you didn't have your big programs diving out your other big programs under his watch. And
it's like for about 15 years there was not a year where at least one SEC program was not facing sanctions that were limiting their ability to compete at the highest level.
Yeah, like bowl bans and TV bans and all that kind of stuff that we don't really do anymore for the most part. But yeah, Slive's like, guess what? If we get turned in, it better be by somebody outside this conference because y'all are not cannibalizing the product.
There are 34 teams between the SEC and the Big Ten as they are going to be reconstituted for the 2024 season. When you start to think about, them leading the way, they are probably not going to close their doors to anybody else, right?
I'd be very shocked if they did. If you have others who want to play in that space, wouldn't you want to sort of have everybody wanting to play a certain model be in that space?
Yes.
It's also just more attractive if you're going to bundle all this stuff and sell it off as one package, which ultimately makes sense. I don't know what the timeline on that would be, but clearly the NFL makes a lot more money not selling the AFC and the NFC separately, right? Now, different networks get different broadcast things, but they sell it as a package to everybody.
You mentioned the college football playoff side of this. So according to reports, they made an effort to their last college football playoff meeting. We remembered they had the meeting. We were expecting a move for the 2024 season from a 6+6 to a 5+7. What I mean by that is in the format that was initially approved, there were the six highest rated conference champions would get an automatic bid to the 12-team playoff. And as it was approved then, we thought, well, many years that will be the 5, power conference champions plus, your highest ranked G5, similar to what we have with the New Year's Six with that kind of designation. Well, now that the Pac-12 doesn't exist, or at least does not exist as the same kind of power conference, there was a move that says, all right, well, let's now change this to 5+7. We create an additional at-large in place of an additional conference champion. Well, because of the way the college football playoff is set up only through the 2025 season, there is still a representative for the Pac-12. We talked about what is the difference of a power conference, and I made the argument on here that it was like, well, the payouts, even at the college football playoff level, still say that the Big 12 and the ACC are power conferences. And so the Pac-12 has a representative. And according to reports, Kirk Schultz from Washington State, he was the lone no in moving from 6+6 to 5+7. Now, is he doing this as a negotiating tactic? I've said before, I'm not really good at understanding the politics of administrators. Like, it's just not my beat. I just don't have it in me. I got other things I'm worried about. I'm crunching the chipolytics, trying to figure out if Miami and Virginia are going to go over under 132.5 on a Monday night. Okay, I'm moving on from that. But
are they?
Others have indicated I'm on the under. Okay. Others have indicated that this might be a long game for him to try to get more when Washington State is obviously not operating from a position of power. So now we've got this, but how do you factor the advisory group into the future of the college football playoff? Because again, right now, all we really have are 2 years. And if you want to talk about the timeline of a big breakaway, right now, the current NCAA tournament contract runs through 2032. The current SEC media rights deals through 32, Big Ten media rights deal through 30, Big 12 through 29, and our college football playoff might be up after 25. How do you tie all these things together?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be a mistake to assume rational behavior on behalf of Schultz just based on certain things that have happened in the Pac-12 before. The Pac-12 does not have a reputation for acting in a rational and good business sense type of way. But yeah, clearly, like I think he would be trying to, unless he's just trying to cause hell, right? Which is possible, but he's probably trying to get some kind of increased payout for them in the future, because otherwise they would be dropped to like a G5 level payout, right? So like G5 teams make a different amount from the playoff than Power 5 teams do in terms of playoff revenue. Greg Sankey's been on record that he doesn't want any auto bids at all. I think that's a real mistake from a business sense, because if you go no auto bids at all, then it really is just a beauty pageant, and the importance of winning a conference title goes down quite a bit. And conference titles are something that do keep fans engaged throughout the entirety of the season. People worry about like the diminishing regular season. Under the current format, I really don't. Not too much.
Under the 12-team format that we're about to go engage in, because I think we look back at some of these conference title races from this past season when we've gone to this divisionless football and now expanded schedules. I mean, trying to figure out who's going to even get a chance to play for the conference championship has made some of these November games extremely exciting.
No doubt about it. So, I mean, Chip, you think about this, I think that they will probably, I don't think the Big Ten would go for no auto bids, because they're probably smart enough to realize that if the conference title games don't have stakes, they don't really matter quite as much. So, but would it be crazy to think that you go to 4 auto bids? Or 3?
That math doesn't.
The 3 highest or the 4 highest?
I think the 5+7 makes total sense to me.
I do too, but that is assuming we stay at 12. Petiti has already put out plans, I believe it's been reported multiple places, to expand to 14 or 16.
Why?
Makes for a better TV product.
Okay.
Right? Like he comes from the NFL side, right?
Right.
So that would I think that's another thing they're probably trying to hammer out here. Is, does the SEC want to go to that number? It works in the FCS. It works in almost all other sports. We don't really see. Does any major sport have less than 12 teams in a playoff?
Baseball?
Well, they got all the play-in type of rounds now, I guess, because they go 3, and like the 2 wild cards. Yeah, I guess it is just
So I like the 5 because you are going to be creating 2 things. Number one, you are having a fair representation that if chalk holds, you're going to have pretty close. Like, you're not going to have all 12 of the 12 best teams, but if chalk holds, you're probably going to have 10 of the 12 best teams. You do have a door open for some of these conferences that aren't operating at the same, revenue level as everybody else. And I do think that the whole idea of going into a conference championship game, when you are on the bubble, so to speak, all of a sudden, all these fan bases are rooting for Oklahoma State Or excuse me, rooting for Texas to beat Oklahoma State. Because if Oklahoma State beats Texas in the Big 12 title game, Texas is probably still going to make the college football playoff as an at-large. Oklahoma State not highly ranked enough to get there. So if you're sitting there, and so I guess this past year we'd be talking about Ohio State, we'd be talking about Missouri, we'd be talking about Ole Miss, talk about Penn State, those other teams that were in New Year's Six spots. Those fan bases then have a vested interest going into conference championship weekend. I end up helping out our college basketball team during conference tournament week. It is amazing how many fans are dialed into action that is not tied specifically to their team because they've gone far enough to figure out all the moving pieces. And so officially put me down for a 5+7 is all good with me. And then if you drop down to just 2 or 3, then we get a little bit more to what you were saying with Sankey's proposal, which is then it's just beauty pageant at that point.
If you get rid of auto bids, you also need to kill conference championship games.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, because otherwise it really is like there becomes a real incentive to sit guys in that, and then you can just do the full beauty pageant. Hey, like we sat a bunch of guys, that's not really our team. We're sitting on our 12-game resume. Judge us on that type of thing. So now, but those leagues make a hell of a lot of money on those conference championship games, man. Like the rights fees they get for those, it's not nothing. I think eventually they could go away if the playoff expands more, which wouldn't really be a problem. Like we've only had conference championship games in most leagues for like 15 or 20 years. It's not like it's been a staple of the sport. SEC only started in what, 90, 94, 92? I know it was Florida Bama. I'm trying to remember what
92.
Year. Yeah, okay. So
the championship game era is 92. We didn't have it in the ACC since 05. Big 10 came even after that. The Big 12 did have one for a long time, then didn't, then brought it back. Pac-12 was recent. Yeah.
So it's not like a staple in the sport necessarily, but it's something I think because it has stakes that we care about.
Have I told you my conference championship thought?
No.
I want to expand the conference championship.
Oh, like a conference tournament?
Yeah, 4 teams and drop a game from the regulars. This is in my okay, Chip, write the rules for the new world where there's only 40 teams or 50 teams or whatever it is. I think that you are not going to get an honest representative of the best team in a conference, in an 18-team conference. I've just looked at these bloated conferences. I've looked at the schedule draws, and I just see all these opportunities for teams that are not necessarily the best team in the conference to wind up via tiebreakers up in one of the top 2 spots. And similarly, teams that probably are deserving not to be there. I just think that trying to find 2 out of a group of 18 when we're only playing 8 or 9 game conference schedules like that to me is where I would say I would lose a regular season game. I would play 10 conference games, and then I would do a 4-team conference tournament into a college football playoff.
That makes some sense. I have to think about only 10-team tournament or only 10-team conference schedule, because I do think that there are certain things I don't want to lose about the sport that we're not going to lose with the 12-team playoff, but we might lose with a 10-team or a 10-game conference schedule. And one of those things would be the ability to travel as a fan to some non-conference games. As a Florida State fan, man, my friends went out to Oklahoma in 2009, I think it was. They lost by 50. They still talk about that trip. Just how awesome the OU fans were to tailgate with, and how it was cool to go see that. That is part of, I think, being a college football fan is the sort of tourism of other stadiums and other campuses, right? Whereas the NFL, you're not doing a lot of tourism. I mean, you could see the city, but
I don't know, buddy. I seen Rams games. Rams games looks like it got a lot of tourism going on right there. Same with the Raiders.
But you're going to see other aspects of the city, right? The only thing Rams about LA is the stadium. Right. Whereas, if I go to Raleigh, man, NC State is just, it's throughout that town. It's not the only thing in that town, obviously, but what I'm talking about. There's a lot of it. So especially these college towns, which Raleigh's not a great example because it's not, totally college town, obviously. But I think that I don't want to lose that. So if you did lose that, would everybody be mandated to play another, Power 5 team or 2? potentially, like that could be really important for me.
Yeah, I think that it's just acknowledging that even just seeing all of your conference is tough with an 18-game league. So, I mean, not 18 team league, very, very difficult.